The San Antonio Spurs have an incredibly bright future. That tends to happen when you have a player that's only 21 years old, was a top 5 player in the world, on pace to win Defensive Player of the Year, and make first team All-NBA when he was healthy, has the upside to be the most dominant basketball player ever on both ends of the floor, and that happens to be the main piece on your roster. However, getting the second overall pick in the draft and landing one of the best guard prospects in recent memory definitely helps as well. The Spurs took Dylan Harper second overall in the 2025 NBA draft. The guard out of Rutgers fits the mold of the jumbo creators that have taken over basketball recently. I want to talk about his game, how he fits with the Spurs, and why the league should be terrified of this. But quickly, before we go any further, if you're new like basketball, I'd really appreciate if you would like, subscribe, and hit the notification bell, notified whenever I release a video. I make videos about basketball, and if you enjoy basketball, I really think you're going to enjoy my content, and doing all those things are the best way to let YouTube, but more importantly myself, know that you enjoy the content so I can make more of it in the future. But let's talk about Dylan Harper, and the place I want to start is his handle. When you look at guards, especially ones that are drafted super highly, ones that project to at least have a chance to be a legit point guard, the handle is the starting point of it all. The handle is what dictates the upside of players that tend to be creators in the league, and I think he has a really good handle. I don't think he had the best handle in the class. I would say that would go to Jeremiah Fears, who we'll talk about in another video probably, but he has a legit handle. It's one that I believe can carry him to being a high-level creator at the NBA level, and even if he didn't, if it was closer to slightly above average, he does have the strength and physicality to make up for deficiencies like that, similar to Cade Cunningham and what he's become in the NBA, but I have no concerns about his handle. It definitely can get tighter. That's almost always going to be the case unless you're Kyrie Irving or Darius Garland, but he's 6'6" with a legit handle, and that alone gives you a great starting point for building on what could be a potential special guard. And it's not just the handle. His best skill, and one that made him a consensus top 2, top 3 guy in the class, is the rim pressure. He has great strength and physicality, great footwork. I'm not comparing him as a player straight up to Jalen Brunson. I think that would be lazy just because they're both, around the New York, New Jersey area and are lefties. But the footwork does have moments where it's like, yeah, that looks like Jalen Brunson. Jalen Brunson has some of the best footwork in the NBA, let alone for somebody his size. And Harper is also very crafty around the basket. He's not the most explosive athlete, but he does have good athleticism. When you have good athleticism combined with special footwork and craft around the basket, you can be a monster rim pressure threat. And he was super efficient around the rim this season as well. And that was really impressive considering how much on-ball responsibility he had this season. He had a usage rate of 29%, which is really high for an 18-year-old guard at a high major level. And to see what he was able to do around the rim, that was something he looked at and really believed it was special, and something that can translate, because even in the league, he's going to be bigger than most guards, and I know they're going to likely put bigger wings on him and things like that, but I think it will translate, and it's really important that it does translate, because rim pressure is the most important thing in the NBA. I know the Pacers made the finals this year, and they might have changed the outlook on is it the most necessary thing, but you look at NBA champions, and they all have rim pressure threats. And even the Pacers, they had Pascal Siakam, who's a great rim pressure threat. But SGA on OKC, Tatum and Brown in Boston, Jokic operates well around the basket, Giannis Antetokounmpo, Steph Curry is an outlier, but even he gets to the rim. I don't need to explain LeBron James. It is important, and I think the fact that he is such a great rim pressure threat is why people were very high on him, including myself. And to add to the ability to get to the rim, he also has high-end playmaking potential, operates incredibly well in the pick and roll, makes great reads, leverages driving threats to open up opportunities, and he only averaged 4 assists per game in college this season, and he had a 1.67 assist to turnover ratio. But I think there needs to be context added here. I know on the surface, only 4 assists with a 1.67 assist to turnover ratio doesn't look great, but he wasn't asked to be a primary, playmaker. He was asked to be a primary creator, and a lot of that was scoring because really he was the only guy on that Rutgers team that can consistently create his own offense, and that led to the high usage. It led to turnovers. I'm not saying that he doesn't have to clean up some turnover problems. He definitely does. All young guards do. But it isn't as glaring as the assist to turnover ratio might suggest. I think if he played on Duke, or if he played on a Kentucky, or any of the other high major blue blood programs, and he got similar usage, not that he would because those teams were better than Rutgers were, but in the hypothetical that he was on a better team and got similar usage, I think he would average closer to maybe 6 or 7 assists per game, but that wasn't what they asked of him to do. And really, for Rutgers to have a chance, he couldn't be an unselfish player that was just setting everyone up. He needed to be a scorer, and that's what he did. And I'm looking at him in his playmaking in particular. It wouldn't shock me if he averaged more assists per game as a rookie in the NBA than he did in college. He's somebody that I think will be a lethal pairing with Victor Wembanyama, and I think he instantly becomes the best playmaker that Wemby has played with outside of obviously a Chris Paul, who's an all-time great playmaker. And I think for San Antonio, why you draft him is you can get, maybe not Chris Paul, because Chris Paul's on another level all time as a playmaker, but you can get at least somewhat similar or at least effective enough playmaking out of a guard and have that next to Wemby for the next decade plus. That is something that will help unlock Wemby and have him be in a spot where he doesn't have to be this on-ball player all the time. Now, Harper isn't perfect either. No prospect is perfect, and if there was such thing as a perfect prospect, I would have made a video about him already and called him the perfect prospect. That this doesn't exist. So, with Harper, there are some shooting concerns. Now, he shot 33.3% from 3 on 5.2 attempts per game this season at Rutgers. And that's not a great number, but considering how much he played on the ball, I'm not too worried about it. He was forced to take a lot of tough shots, and I think because of that and the lack of spacing, I don't really view 33.3% as a negative. I actually think it's somewhat encouraging that he was able to even be close to around average on really good volume despite his situation. He's not a perfect shooter though. The form is kind of low. It kind of reminds me a bit of Brandon Miller. But, those are things that can improve in the league. He's somebody that I look at and say, can he be a 35 to 37% 3-point shooter on 5 to 6 attempts per game? I think that's very much in the cards. He doesn't lack confidence as a shooter. I think that there are positive indicators there, but it is something he'll need to work on. He's also not a great pull-up shooter right now, and I think that becoming a great pull-up shooter could take his pick and roll game to the next level, add more dimension to his ability in those specific situations. So I do think that is the biggest area of quote-unquote concern for him in terms of reaching his highest end potential. But I don't think it's something that is so worrying that you don't think it's possible he gets better and discourages you from seeing the type of ceiling that I believe he has. And in terms of fit with the Spurs, he is instantly the second highest upside player on that roster for me. And that's a good roster with a ton of guys that have upside. And I know there was some talk, it wasn't a lot of talk, but there was some talk about, do you take him at 2 or do you try to move back? Because what if he gets in the way of Stephon Castle? You traded for De'Aaron Fox. My thing is, Dylan Harper is one of those talents that you look at and you don't pass up on. Draft fit does not matter. Your roster doesn't really matter and how it's going to work when you have a number 2 pick and there's a prospect like this on the board. He goes 1 in a lot of other years. It's rare that he would even be available at 2 in most years, and he is available. So you take him and figure it out later. I don't think that I would look at the De'Aaron Fox trade and say they regret making it now, because they didn't know they were going to get the number 2 pick in the draft. They jumped up in the lottery a lot to get that pick. And I don't think it's impossible for it to work with Castle and Fox either. He has good off-ball moments in his priors off the catch, so he's not incapable of it. It was just that he was asked to be this primary guy at Rutgers this season. And I think Castle being able to work off the ball more will make him more efficient. That was the big thing with him this season. And something I think I want to see improve over the years is the efficiency. And I think Fox can play a bit off the ball as well. And again, it's just too much of a talented player to not take here. And it's something that you can't worry about. You worry about that later. And I always look back on it and say, Michael Jordan went 3rd overall because the Blazers had Clyde Drexler. Now, there's more context to that, but a big reason why is they already had a guard. You don't worry about that, and you don't want to make that type of mistake. And I'm not saying Dylan Harper is Michael Jordan. I will never say that. That's too much of an expectation. But they made the right pick taking him here, and I think it's going to work out in the long term. But how good can Dylan Harper be? I think the best case scenario for him, if he improves the pull-up shooting ability and becomes more efficient as a shooter, is something like a taller Jalen Brunson. I know it's kind of lazy. There are a lot of similarities between like where they're from, left-handed, but there is a footwork thing. But, Jalen Brunson is a legit number 1 guy. I know there's some discourse around it, but he can be your best player on a contender. He can be a guy that leads your team to a title. Maybe they aren't doing it right in New York right now, but there is a way to do it. And if Harper hits his best outcome, he can do a lot of the things that Brunson does, and he's taller, so you don't have those size concerns. But that's the best possible outcome. A median outcome that I really like, and something that Hoop Intellect brought up in his prospect breakdown of Harper, was Jalen Williams, J-Dub. So somebody that is a flawed creator to an extent, but is an elite number 2. And we saw that in the playoffs. There were moments where J-Dub wasn't at his best. It didn't look good. And if he was the primary, they would have easily lost the game. But he wasn't. He was the number 2. But he also had those moments, like in the finals, where he had that 40-point game that helped them go up to 3-2 in the series, where he can rise up to that moment. Jalen Brown's another example of that, although I think J-Dub fits more of the description of what Harper might look like. An all-around guy, someone that can average around 20 to maybe 25 points per game, 5+ rebounds per game, 5+ assists per game, being elite number 2 on offense. I don't know if he'll be the defender J-Dub is. J-Dub is one of the best defensive players in the league. But again, somebody that is an elite number 2 that can be a number 1 in flashes. I think that's like a median, realistic high-end expectation for him. And I think something on the lower end would be like RJ Barrett. Again, I know the lefty thing, but there are some similarities in their profile. They're both around 6'6". They're both around 215 pounds entering the league. They both have around 6'10 plus wingspans. There are similarities in their physical profiles and the pull-up shooting. Like RJ Barrett had those concerns as well. And I think if the pull-up shooting never develops, he'll be RJ Barrett light. I think there's a chance it's probably better than RJ, because I think he's a better playmaker than RJ was entering the league. But, somebody that can put up the numbers, but the impact isn't always there because of some of the flaws in their game. And that's what RJ's been. RJ had a pretty good year this past season. He put up pretty good numbers. But, you obviously saw the flaws on tape that hold him back from being like, a J-Dub is, who put up similar numbers on paper, to what RG did, at least from like the point, rebound, assist per game perspective. So I think that's a lower end outcome. The pop shooting never progresses, but that's a really good profile to have. You have the high end. He's an all NBA first team level guy that's even bigger than the guy I'm trying to compare him to. Median outcome is still an all NBA level guy, but maybe not a first team guy, but close to that second, third team guy. Will be in the top 20 conversations. That's a realistic expectation for him, in my opinion. And then low end is a flawed player that may not have quite the impact that his numbers suggest, but is still very talented and productive. I think the Spurs nailed it out of the park with respect. They don't get too much credit. They had a number 2 pick, and it wasn't like they were getting Cooper Flag, and there was an obvious guy to take. But I think if everything goes right and he becomes the player I think he can, it's going to be terrifying for the league, because it already was before he was drafted to them.